Broncos go. Way to save the season to throw. Fire and down! Incomplete down at the goal line by San Diego. Tomlinson off the left side. Tomlinson sidestep. Hello, history books. Think they have to now. Here's Sproles. Sproles inside the 10, inside the 5, and the Chargers win the game. Charger fans are witnesses to history.
Whew, man. All right. Hey, guys. Welcome to our first episode of After Hours for 2023, and it's going to be a tough one. Chargers lose this one 36-34. Home opener, had a chance to win it at the end. A lot of things contributed to this loss. I guess let's talk about let's just talk about an overview here. It's over 500 yards of offense Miami put on the board today, 466 passing yards, 215 yards for Tyreek Hill by himself, 2 touchdowns, the go-ahead touchdown. For a guy like Staley, who is the defensive wunderkind and the guy who spent all offseason thinking about that Jacksonville loss, which we've heard over and over from their all-in series to telling the commentators on the sideline about it today, to come out with, a month or so, a couple weeks of planning to go against this Miami Dolphins. Their defensive game plan, at least, was non-existent. They got one punt today.
A punt, a fumble recovery, and a pick.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what do you guys think about the overall game plan today defensively? Because I think that might be the place to start.
Garrett, I thought that was a beautiful summary. Let's end it now.
I couldn't have said it any better, man. I think you nailed it. All the talking points. Bing, bing.
Yeah, you hit all the talking points. We're done. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later.
So let me jump in here really quickly because I need to blow off a little bit of steam. I'll give it this much. Take this into consideration. You got 2 teams, and I'm not making any excuses here, but it's the truth, that both understand the defensive scheme. So I can almost sort of kind of understand them knowing how to take advantage of it. The issue that I have is that you've already played this team. You know how they utilize their offensive weapons. You know where Tua is the most efficient. Pretty much the only place he can be effective with throwing the ball on the field. And it was open literally almost every play. Almost every passing play, there was a wide open middle of the field. It was almost always vacated. They did a really good job at creating space by utilizing multiple wide receivers, putting Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle in motion. It's ironic, though, that Brandon Staley visited Steve Kerr this offseason with the Golden State Warriors, and yet Mr. McDaniel was the one who had Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle being Steph Curry and having all of the Chargers have to chase them around constantly pre and post snap. So it was a little irony there for me. But I can't get beyond the fact that the middle of the field was this gaping hole, it was a crater all game long. And the Dolphins got whatever they wanted whenever they wanted in the passing game. It's just chunk play after chunk play after chunk play. And it's almost like, how aren't you prepared for this? You've already seen it. I don't know. I mean, when I go back to rewatch it, I'll see what tweaks they may have made in comparison to how they finished things off last season. But ultimately, Tua did what Tua normally does when you give it to him. And I didn't see them doing very much in the way of crowding the middle of the field at all. And there was way too much Kenneth Murray in coverage, them running 2 linebacker sets. Even if it was out of nickel, you can replace that in a big nickel set and utilize a DB, and that'll help you with defending those wide receivers a bit. But no, they were just bumping their heads against the wall, still running out 2 linebackers. And it was, I mean, everyone else saw it. They got gashed all game long. Give the offense credit. It was great to see very, well, could call it balanced, but the passing game ended up falling short of the running game. I think it was substantially as far as snaps are concerned. I don't remember the exact number, but it was really good to see the running game be dominant for a change. Over 200 yards rushing. Joshua Kelly tip my hat to him. Didn't give him enough credit. He actually ran with really good vision today and explosive and decisiveness. Also kind of in spot duty of Eckler later when he got a little banged up. But outside of that, I don't have too many problems with the offensive game plans. There were some silly things that Moore did here and there when he got a little cute on third down when he didn't necessarily have to. But, and I'll toss it back to you guys after this because otherwise I'm just going to be ranting. Lost the game by 2 points. And you can directly link this back to one thing that happened. Well, there were multiple.
Yeah,
there's one thing that stands out above everything else, that if that doesn't happen, you could potentially be looking at a different game. And I know we don't like to live in the what ifs, but you can't ignore it. And the fact that he was taken out in the game later on, J.C. Jackson, I'm sure you all know who I'm talking about, tells me all I need to know about who the team thinks is a weak link right now.
And you're talking about specifically him not taking a knee in the end zone after that interception?
Oh, I'm talking about the field goal before halftime.
Oh, that too. Okay. All right. Yep. Yeah. That's 3 points.
I mean, pick one.
Yeah. There's multiple, and it's not all on JC, but yeah, that's definitely.
And also, there was no pass rush to speak of, but let's move on, I guess.
I think for me, the defensive game plan was really alarming because they just didn't seem prepared, like Craig said, at all. I don't know what they thought the game plan was, but whatever it was, it didn't work. They didn't flood the middle of the field at all. I thought they should have been able to get to Tua with 4 rushers. They weren't able to, and they never really adjusted. I didn't see a whole lot of pressure looks, which I thought they'd give him and back out to flood the middle of the field. It just seemed like a pretty vanilla game plan, and nobody seemed to know what was going on. There was a lot of confusion, a lot of people running free in the middle of the field. They made Tua look really good. You got to give him credit. He made some throws that I think a lot of us didn't think he could make, and he made those throws. It was there whenever he wanted it. Made some throws on the run, which we weren't sure he'd be able to do. Found the perimeter at times, found the middle of the field pretty much all day long. Hit guys in stride, made some good anticipatory throws. He had a really good day, but I think the Chargers defense was just bad all the way around. There was no pressure. Got to wonder now about what last season's injuries took out of Joey Bosa, because he was largely invisible all day long. Mac hardly showed up at all today. We had 2 really backup tackles, basically shut those guys down all day long. And that's kind of alarming. It doesn't bode a lot of confidence or bring a lot of confidence for this group moving forward. And then I felt like they were in base defense a lot today. It seemed like they had 2 linebackers on the field a lot. It didn't seem like they were bringing in that extra corner or 2 extra defensive backs like they normally would. And they were asking Murray and Kendricks both to run with Waddle and Hill out of the slot, and they just couldn't do it. And they couldn't even keep up with Smythe, who is hardly a star tight end. So they've got some issues they've got to deal with. A lot of things to clean up on defense, just all around bad. It's one of those, I just had this conversation with my daughter Grace about a softball game last week where she didn't pitch well and she was upset. And I said, you know what? We got a choice. We can talk about it or we can just burn the tape and pretend it didn't happen. And this was a burn the tape game. This is one of those games where there's so many things that went wrong on defense in particular that I don't know if they can fix everything. And they just kind of need to move on and start game planning for Tennessee, because it could take them weeks to fix what went wrong today on defense.
Yeah. It's hard to parse out exactly what went wrong, but it's almost like staring you right in the face, like Craig's talking about, where it's like the entire middle of the field was wide open for them all day. It was completely open. I tweeted it out. It was open for business. And that was early on in the game, and they just went back to it. And quite honestly, everybody knows that's Tua's strong suit is the middle of the field, and yet they left it open. And you're gonna get burnt by Tyreek Hill. I mean, he is just a human mismatch, and that's why he's a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. Was with the Chiefs, is with the Dolphins. I understand that, but the fact that they didn't do anything to limit him at all, they didn't bracket him, they didn't send any other person to his side, really is concerning, knowing that there was one guy who was beating you and you continued to dare the Dolphins to keep going back to the well when the Chargers could have at least tried to double him. When they first matched up in Miami, they bracketed him a lot. And they had the one fluke touchdown we've mentioned a lot where they hit him down the sideline and Michael Davis fell down. And if he didn't fall down, he probably picks off that ball. But, they did a really, really nice job of kind of bracketing him and getting pressure on Tua. And they didn't do any of that today. And it is concerning because there are really, really high hopes for Mac and Bosa. And I know they haven't really played a lot together, but individually they weren't very good today. Bosa popped only in the negative when he had the terrible false start penalty or offsides penalty to start the game when Tua fumbled the ball. And then he had a face mask penalty while getting in the backfield. I thought Mac had a couple splash plays in the run game, but getting after Tua, they just couldn't do it all day today. And so the thing that was working last year didn't work this year. And it's not like they put in any effort to, make sure to take away Tyreek, which I think was the most concerning part. Was they were like, well, this is our game plan. We're going to stick with it for 4 quarters. And they ended up just getting burnt by it.
The other thing that really alarms me in the way of not having adjustments be made is if you're not winning on the outside and just what should be 2 dominant edge rushers against 2 backup tackles, why aren't you attempting to manufacture pressure up the middle into his face? Because I'll give him credit also, to Jamie's point, he was making some pretty good throws off script, which is not one of his strengths. But I'll take my chances getting Tua on the run and making him throw the ball as opposed to letting him be able to step up into the pocket and deliver the ball. I didn't see any changes made in that way in the second half. They just continuously went with rushing 4. There were occasions when they would send Derwin, but you don't have to just do that with Derwin. If you don't want to sacrifice him in coverage and zone, you can drop him back there and send someone else off the inside, whether it be Zant or anyone really. You can pick a DB, whoever you want it to be, but you have to roll the dice a few times. If you're not getting home with just 4, you can't just continue to do what you feel like is going to work when there's no proof of it that it's ever going to happen. And as far as the coverage on the outside is concerned, I'm not sure why they were playing that like soft shoe press. And like for those out there who don't know what that is, like it's press coverage, but it's not press at the line. You're playing off like 2 or 3 yards and you allow the wide receiver to get off the line of scrimmage and then you try to get hands on him to redirect him. And that's not what you want to do with like a Tyreek Hill because he's so quick that if you miss, then it's over. Now, if you're a bigger guy like Mike Davis is, you probably have a better chance at getting hands on him right off of the line of scrimmage as opposed to giving him space to operate. And I think the same exact thing happened when J.C. Jackson got beat on that go ball in third, fourth quarter, whenever that was. Third. I think he was playing the same type of coverage. It was soft shoe press. He didn't get hands on him. And there's no coverage or help over the top. You're asking for that. And for someone who prides himself on being a defensive mastermind, we've been through this year after year after year at this point. Where's the difference? We saw it start to improve towards the end of the season, but this particular game is where it stands out as making no sense at all because you knew what was coming and you still weren't prepared for it. That blows my mind.
Yeah, I think, we've talked a lot about the run that the defense had at the end of last season when Staley started simplifying things and not asking guys to do so much. And I think the question for me going into the season was how much of that was the schedule? How much of that was Staley? And did they just run into a soft spot in the schedule where they could simplify things and the other teams weren't able to take advantage of what they were doing? And it certainly seems like they were not prepared for this game. And it seems like, at least based on this one game, and it is just one game, it seems to me like we're seeing a situation that was more scheduled than Staley, that they played some weak teams that were falling apart. I mean, Staley had some good games against good teams. He had that game against the Dolphins last year. He coached a pretty good game against the Niners last year, but most of those teams they beat down the stretch were not very good. So now we need to see what kind of adjustments he can make and how he can put these guys in a position to succeed early in the season and can he make it? Can he make these adjustments? Can he learn from his mistakes? Can he simplify things? Because, I mean, I need to go back and watch the tape, but, was he just asking everybody to do everything again? And were they confused, or were they just utterly unprepared? I don't know what the answer is, but there's a lot of questions about that defensive game plan going into this game and why they didn't have a backup or make any adjustments at all. I mean, to have Taylor trying to run stride for stride with Tyreek Hill down the sideline late in the game, I don't understand that at all. It just seems like there's a complete, I don't know, lack of awareness of what the personnel is and who should be doing what.
Yeah, I'm afraid that Ansley's going to catch a lot of heat for this, and I feel like we all know who the culprit is here defensively. And it really is a shame because I feel like there was so much fun stuff. I was hoping they would win at the end so we could be a little bit more excited about how the offense played today and Kellen Moore's new system and how a little bit more fun that was. But all this stuff that happened at the end and all this shit with JC Jackson and no pass rush. And in my mind that it would have been great to, win the way they were all lined up. But the fact that they didn't do anything to combat anything, like trying to get extra rushers like Jamie's talking about, or creating pressure up the middle like Craig's talking about, or bracketing like I mentioned a little bit earlier, like the fact that even if you had your best game plan going into this game and it didn't work, at some point you have to burn it and start over and try to go back to the well and figure something else out. And the fact that there wasn't any of that for 4 quarters is very, very concerning to me, because that's just Staley kind of just being hard-headed and not fixing what was not working.
Yeah, I really thought they would try to run some stunts in games on those tackles and create some interior pressure. Didn't really seem to see a whole lot of that. So I'm not sure what the pressure plan was, but there wasn't a whole lot of blitzing. When they did blitz, it didn't work. I didn't see a whole lot of complicated blitz schemes or blitz looks where they were dropping guys back. It just kind of seemed like they were doing the same thing over and over again with no success and no answers. For me, I think there were kind of three plays or sequences that really changed this game for the Chargers. Obviously, Craig mentioned the pass interference on the Hail Mary before halftime. That was just unbelievably boneheaded. I still can't imagine what JC was thinking when he decided to push Tyreek Hill with the ball in the air like that. Just stupid. Something you wouldn't expect from a former elite corner who's been in the league for 6 years or whatever it is. He should know better. I also thought that the play calling right after I'm drawing a blank here. Right after JC's interception.
Mm-hmm.
So he picks the ball off. He runs it out to the 6. The Chargers had just gone down the field, run the ball down the Dolphins' throats on the previous drive to score a touchdown. And what do they come out? What do they do? They come out and they throw 3 balls behind the line of scrimmage on the next 3 plays. 3rd and 1, you're averaging 6 or 7 yards a clip, and you're passing the ball on 3rd and 1 for a team that's been talking for 3 years about being physical at the line of scrimmage and winning at the point of attack. That's why, everybody was excited about Parham's touchdown on the first touchdown drive. But to me, you're on the goal line. You're in a situation where you have to be able to run the ball, and you're throwing a pass from the goal line for a 1-yard touchdown. Like, that kind of speaks to their mentality and their confidence in the running game, despite how good it was to throw in that situation and to throw on 3rd and 1 later in the game when you need points. I don't love the play calling. I really didn't understand that sequence of play calls for Moore. And I felt like the offense felt gimmicky to me. The running game was fantastic, and the offensive line was outstanding. By far the best offensive line performance we've probably seen the Chargers have as a group, probably since early in LT's career.
Except for that last drive.
Except for the last drive.
Yeah.
But overall, for the majority of 4 quarters, that offensive line, they protected Herbert. They ran the ball extremely well. Seems like they've found a running scheme and an identity that works. But the passing game to me was just really gimmicky. Lots of balls behind the line of scrimmage. We still saw some stick. They took some shots down the field, and Herbert didn't hit them. He wasn't really on his game. But there were entire stretches of that game where it seemed like every pass was behind the line of scrimmage, and they were running a horizontal passing game. And that is not what I thought they brought Kellen Moore in for. So I hope there's more in the bag there, because the way they called the passing game today was just not good.
We're talking about how they ran the ball. They dialed up power almost all day long, and it was effective literally every time they ran it. There were instances where the Dolphins knew the run was coming and they still couldn't do a thing about it. And you're talking about, and before the game, I was frustrated because Isaiah Spiller was inactive, and it just kind of bugged me a bit because I didn't really understand the purpose. At this point, why did you draft the guy if he's not going to see the field in year 2? And I get that by having 5 wide receivers and taking on 4 running backs, you probably need a kick return or 2, and that's not what Spiller does. So then maybe that's why they made him inactive. Dotson can return, so I guess. But without going too far on a tangent there, the offense as a whole, yes, I agree, Jamie, was a bit gimmicky. Especially in situations where you know what you've been doing is working, and then you try to get a little too cutesy, like the inside zone shovel passes. It worked the first time, I think, but on 3rd and 1, why is that something that you want to try again in negative territory, as opposed to just lining up and running power, which has been working all game long, and extending that drive? Make that defense stay on the field longer, because the Chargers were kind of marching the ball down the field. It wasn't necessarily at the same rate that the Dolphins were, because the Dolphins were just taking chunk throws down the field and making it happen, because they completely abandoned the run game. After they figured out that the Chargers weren't adjusting, they just said the hell with running it, because that's also something that's very scary. I know I'm bouncing around a bit, but they didn't necessarily stop the Dolphins from running the ball. Early on, the Dolphins were getting what they wanted with the run. They just figured out, oh, well, they can't stop us passing the ball. Let's just light up the scoreboard. And so they got away from the run. But again, back to the offense, I liked a lot of what Moore did. What I'm not certain about is Justin Herbert's level of comfortability with all of his wide receivers at this point, because you can tell Keenan is his guy. If there's a play that needs to be made, he's absolutely going to 13. Mike Williams was a specter again today. He got hurt, banged up a little bit, came up big with a nice 30-yard grab to extend the drive late in the game. That was awesome. But other than that, it didn't seem like he was a huge part of the game plan. They got him the ball on some quick, kind of smoke screens to allow him to try to make some run after catch situations work, but that didn't happen. I'm not sure. It's going to take me having to go back to look at it again, but I don't know if they had Darius Davis run any vertical routes when he stepped on the field at all. Just threaten them deep in that way and maybe open up the middle of the field for some of your more intermediate guys. Felt like he was just in there kind of for trick plays, a little bit as a novelty, but not necessarily someone who was a vital part of the game plan. And Quentin Johnston, I mean, you spend a first-round pick on him. He got a few snaps here and there. And I think that was that 3rd and 1 play that I was alluding to, where they attempted to get him the ball and they got shut down. But it doesn't look like that there was a very intricate game plan put in place here. It almost just felt like they thought they were going to come out and just roll these guys, and it didn't work out the way that they planned it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I don't know if we talked about it, but another big kind of turning point was the drive before the last one, where they drove all the way down the field and they got in the red zone. Up to that point, they were 4 for 4, I think, in the red zone with 4 touchdowns. And Parham scored, Herbert, Eckler, and Kelly. 4 for 4. And then, so they're already successful in the red zone, and they get up to the line of scrimmage on 3rd down, and you see Herbert rush, and he's frantic at the line, and none of the receivers look like they're set and ready. And then Herbert hikes the ball and he has to throw it out of the back of the end zone. That play there felt like I know they wanted to go for tempo, and I know that was really important for a lot of different reasons, and they got some first downs off of it. They got a touchdown off of it. It was great. I like the tempo today. I understand, throwing behind the line of scrimmage and stuff. And it felt like Kellen Moore was just trying to get these Dolphins DBs to guard sideline to sideline. And for that point, part of it makes sense. But again, there had to be a lot more shots downfield today, and that didn't happen. But on third down, I mean, this is such an important down, they need to score a touchdown here. I mean, they ended up scoring a field goal, and that Dolphins ended up winning. But if they take a timeout there, if Herbert slows it down, it just felt like it was way too frenetic. It was way too chaotic for such an important down for Staley not to call a timeout there. I felt really, really hurt them because it didn't felt like anybody was set. Anybody was ready. I don't even know if Herbert was good with what play he was checking into. It didn't work all around. And that was such an important down there. And it didn't end up working out. And he couldn't even get anything close to a playoff. He threw out of the back of the end zone, and then they had to kick a field goal there. So I felt like, JC Jackson, there was a couple of points where he really hurt this team on the penalty at the end of the half, like Craig mentioned, not taking a knee out of the end zone. If he takes a knee out of the end zone there, they get it on the 20. Herbert's not backed up and having to, tuck the ball out of the end zone so he doesn't get a safety. And then the short punt comes off right after that. They get on 35. And then very next play is that go route Craig was talking about where he gets burnt for the touchdown. It's like JC Jackson was just on the ass end of a lot of really bad plays today. And for me, I thought that play, the second to last drive where they had that third down play and they were rushing to the line to get it done, I felt like that was the wrong time to do it.
Yeah, it just seemed like it took a while to get the play in because they snapped the ball with like 1 second left. And if I recall, Herbert was trying to change the play, and I think he had Everett motion at the last second. Like they were down to like 5 or 6 seconds, and he had Everett motion, and Everett barely got set before they snapped the ball. I thought the whole tempo of that entire second to last drive, and really in a lot of ways, the tempo in the fourth quarter, like the second half of the fourth quarter, was not great. It seemed like they lost their feel for the game. They lost the tempo with the offensive play calling and getting plays in and out. And that last drive, they were successful in moving the ball and they kicked the field goal, but it seemed like it got bogged down and they were bringing the clock down to 0 or 1 a lot, or 1 or 2 seconds quite a bit. And I realized they were trying to burn clock, but in that situation, points are more important than burning clock. And so taking the clock all the way down to 1 and putting yourself in a situation where the Dolphins know when the ball is being snapped, you've given them a chance to get set on the line, and now you're having to rush to get the playoff and being frenetic. They really needed a timeout in that situation. I totally agree. I thought that was a wasted opportunity to call a timeout. And who knows, maybe Staley calls that timeout if he doesn't burn the timeout on the catch challenge that he made on Berrios earlier in the half. But yeah, that whole drive was not very well run. They got points out of it, which was good, but the tempo was different than it was the entire game. They just never seemed to be in a rhythm in that last drive, and I think it cost them at the end.
This team has something that consistently happens with them. It seems like year in and year out. There are always these flashpoint moments in these games where you can identify exactly where things kind of fell off of a cliff. And in this game, there were so many, you can kind of, pick and choose, but early on, just looking at it from the perspective of how close the game ended up, Tua had how many times did Tua fumble? 3 or 4?
3.
Okay. 3 fumbles, throws a pick. Granted, they were able to.
One of them didn't count, though. The first one didn't count because of the offsides, but yeah, 3 times.
Okay. Yeah. Because of the offsides. Thanks, Joey. Wouldn't have mattered really anyway, but ultimately there were so many things that you can pick from in this game, but this team constantly shoots itself in the foot. It's an annual tradition. It's so weird that you almost can identify a single player almost every time it happens. It's not like a collective thing per se. It's not like multiple guys screwed up and they all just play very poorly. In this scenario, the person who's going to get the majority of the blame is going to be JC Jackson, whether or not that's fair or not, whatever. But he did make multiple plays that cost the team, and they weren't able to overcome it. Even looking at that last scoring drive where they ended up getting 3 as opposed to a touchdown, well, you look at more in that scenario and it's kind of like, well, great. You were 4 for 4 in the red zone all game long. And when it mattered, you couldn't make it happen. And that's going to be a critique as well. There's a lot of blame to go around. Justin Herbert, that last drive, you can't get a grounding call there. You can't. You're just putting yourself in a much more precarious situation. And yes, we've seen him make multiple comebacks in the past, but you were asking for a lot at that point because you absolutely had to air it out and there wasn't an option to run the ball anymore. So it wasn't necessarily like you could keep the Dolphins on their heels, and you ran through a bunch of timeouts. So again, there's a lot of blame to go around. And as much as I know people are going to want to look at one specific thing, and even I, in talking through this and identifying that JC Jackson penalty before the half, truth of the matter is there were a bunch of things that went wrong. And if 1 or 2 of them don't happen, the Chargers probably win this game. I will also give them credit, though, because this is what I did see offensively. The middle 8 scenario that was stressed, they did a pretty good job on that. In the end of the first half, aside from JC, helping the Dolphins get a 3-point lead before halftime, they were able to tie it up. And then they came out on the first drive in the second half and they scored then. So they optimized that time. The middle 8 looked okay, with the exception of a few defensive boneheaded plays. They did a pretty decent job there, but I don't know, man. Staley, after one game, this is not how you want to feel about the guy that's supposed to be a defensive guru. We've given him tons of passes here, and ultimately going into next week, like Jamie says, probably just have to scrap this, but it's going to be tough to just sit with this for a week. They can come out next week and they can kick the Titans' teeth in. But for me, this one's going to linger for a little while because I just can't make heads or tails of the defensive game plan from someone who's supposed to specialize in this.
500 yards of offense. I mentioned it at the top. Only 1 punt. You got 2 turnovers, still found a way to lose this game. You had almost 2 running backs run for 100 yards today. Kelly was short by 9 yards. He had 91. Both scored touchdowns. They had over 200 yards on the ground. Eckler and Kelly were averaging 6.5 yards per carry. I mean, the offensive line outside of the last drive played their ass off today. They were resetting the line of scrimmage. That play that Jamie mentioned where they decided to get cute on a 3rd and 1 in their own territory, like get backed up there while they're averaging 6.5 yards per carry. That is ridiculous that they would do that. I thought the offensive line in the run game was outstanding today. I felt like Herbert had so much time to operate outside of the last drive today, and towards the end of the game, it kind of faltered a little bit, but I felt like the offensive line did really, really good today, and the run game was really, really nice. I mean, the Dolphins are a top 5 run defense. They were number 4 last year. They did not give up a lot of yards. Chargers, and we saw the graphic like 100 times, averaged 89 yards on the ground last season. They put up over 230 today. That's got to be nice going into the Titans game. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to look at this game and take away some good stuff defensively, because even the fumble recovery was a bad snap, which Tua did, again, 3 times during the game, 2 that counted. The interception was a lollipop to JC Jackson. I mean, that was an absolute gimme. And Tua threw a couple of those today, and they only made 1 count. So outside of that, I mean, I know there was some good edge setting. I thought Thule had just an amazing tackle for a loss today. I didn't think the corners did all that well today. Derwin did pretty good when he was sent off to get after the quarterback today. But I mean, there's just, I don't know, defensively, you have to start all over because this isn't enough. And I know there's going to be a lot of arguments today, and I'll ask you guys. I mean, none of the starters got any play in preseason. I know Mike Tomlin, even though they got their heads caved in today against the 49ers, but he talked about how important it is to get your starters some play in the preseason because you got to spar before the title fight, is what he said. So do you guys believe at least a little bit that these guys are still shaking off the rust and the 500 yards are just because they didn't get a lot of play in the preseason, or does this group stink so far?
They stink.
Both? Yeah. Okay.
They stink. I think, I mean, the offense wasn't overly rusty. I guess you could argue Herbert was a little rusty today. He didn't look great, but
No.
the offense put up 34 points, and none of those guys played outside of Zion and Salyer. So I think it's just a matter of the defense being bad. They just didn't play well. That's a group that is comprised almost entirely of longtime veterans in the NFL. They know how to get themselves ready. They know what's required of them. They should understand the game plan and be able to carry it out. If they're being asked to do things they can't carry out, then that's on the coaching. But in terms of being ready, I just don't buy that playing these guys in the preseason is why they're not playing these guys in the preseason is why they didn't play well. I just think they had an awful game, and they all have to look in the mirror and ask themselves some serious questions, because as a group, they really didn't show up tonight.
I just think they're bad right now also. And as far as giving credit or excuses or maybe a reason as to why, the defense, I'm not giving them a pass because, number one, they played this team. They know exactly what the weaknesses of this team are because it hasn't changed a lot. It's the same offense. But on the reverse of that, your offense is a new scheme, and they came out just fine. So it's a little different for me because it just feels like at some point, and we don't do this, but I know just kind of across maybe a little bit of the fandom, Staley gets a pass, and we can't do that anymore. It's been multiple years of the same thing. And at some point, you have to point out what the common denominator is. You get the players that you want, still not succeeding. Yeah, you dealt with injuries last year, so it affected things. Totally understand. This was week 1. All your guys were there. You knew what this offense was going to do to attack you because you played them before. And even if they made some adjustments, what you did know for certain is the guy that's their signal caller has one area of the field that he's going to target because it's where he's most effective. And you still weren't able to do anything about it. So I can't give the defense a pass for having rust and not playing the preseason, because the offense came out and they were clicking pretty well. And again, like I mentioned before, that's a completely new scheme.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think even though they put up 34 points, I think there are some questions asked about the offense, things that we'll have to see answered over the next few weeks, over the course of the season. One is, how willing is this team to push the ball down the field when there are 2 deep safeties? Now, I'm not saying you need to be throwing the ball 30 yards down the field with 2 safeties playing deep, but if you're seeing a lot of cover 2 and cover 6, we've talked about it. There are holes in that zone between the corners and the safeties, between the linebackers and the safeties, that you have to be able to access. And they certainly have a quarterback with the arm talent to access that. And I think we all just assumed that Justin was being coached to check the ball down. Based on what we saw from the offense today, it seemed like the game plan was to check the ball down, throw the ball underneath, and try to get yards after catch, which is fine. But are they coaching him? Are they going to cut him loose? Are they coaching him to find those holes in the defense? And is he willing to make those throws? Because we're now entering year 4, and I'm not sure how willing he is to take those chances. He might be so risk averse that he's just not going to take those chances. And there are opportunities to take those chances. I'm not saying Justin isn't a fantastic quarterback. I love Justin Herbert. I love watching him play. He's an easy guy to root for. He's supremely talented. I just hope that the last few years of coaching haven't spoiled his willingness to push the ball down the field. And I hope that there isn't something going on with him internally that's preventing him from taking those throws, because they have to be able to push the ball down the field, find not just deep opportunities to push the ball down the field deep, but intermediate, up the seams, to the boundaries, layer the ball. And he's not doing it. And I don't know if he's not being asked to do it. I don't know if he's being coached to check the ball down, but he needs to open things up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And to answer my own question, I think I did in the beginning, but I'm not giving Staley a pass. I know obviously the season isn't over, and we kind of clown that guy who said if the Chargers lost this game, the season was basically over because they would lose to backup tackles. But season isn't over, but this is a really, really, really bad way to start it off, because there's a lot of terrible things that happened in this game that could continue on and run out through the season and make this a really depressing 2023 season for the Chargers. So, yeah, we'll have to see for the next couple of weeks. The season's not over, but Yeah, I'm having a hard time swallowing this pill. I think everybody else is too. But another thing with Herbert, we saw early on, it felt like he went through his progressions. He went through his 1, 2, 3 reads, and then he was taking off with the football. And we saw him gain some extra yards. We saw him run for some first downs early on. And I didn't feel like a lot of that was happening towards the end of that game. I felt like even on that third down where he threw it to the back of the end zone, the middle of the field became wide open to him. And he didn't have much to go. And he just decided to throw it out of the end zone and not try to create with his legs. I loved the idea of him creating with his legs early on, and the fact that he, pushed it a couple times was a good sign after the rib injury. But I felt like that went away too offensively, which I don't, I think maybe Herbert wanted to pound on his arm a little bit more, but it really helped him out early in that game, and it had a lot of success. And I wish he would have went back to it, because I felt like there was a couple times in that second half he could have at least ran for that first down and decided to kind of tuck it and throw it.
I will also point out something that I'm encouraged by, and it's the autonomy that he seems to have at the line of scrimmage now. We saw him check at the line a couple times. That 51-yard play by Eckler was a check from Herbert that allowed a big run there and swung some more momentum back to the Chargers' way. So I think there were a couple of occasions where I saw him check into some other plays. The only thing that I hate is when he comes to the line, he yells "kill." It's almost 1,000% going to be a running play.
Oh yeah,
they have to figure out some way to get some other language in there to maybe audible to a different play, because if I'm catching that, defenses are going to catch it in the league. So, but again, I'm really encouraged by the fact that he's able to operate at the line of scrimmage and not have to have all the calls come from the sideline. I'm sure there's like some check with me stuff that goes on based on whatever look he gets from the defense. So that's great. But ultimately, yeah, this was kind of like an uneven performance from him. I agree with you, Garrett, like the fact that he was utilizing his legs. You saw him, extend a couple drives, literally make a guy miss in the open field and get some yards moving forward, which is not something we saw from him in the past. After year one, but something that we know that he was capable of doing at Oregon. As far as him being a little pensive about pushing the ball down the field, this is going to take me having to go back and watch. Part of me wants to see what type of routes were being utilized, of what kind of separation was being created vertically. I'm not 100% sure about that. There were some downs where the Dolphins just had supreme coverage on the wide receivers, and Herbert's just sitting there patting the ball for like 3 or 4 seconds, which is a testament to the protection he was getting today, which was phenomenal up until the very last drive. But I don't know that all of it has to do with him just being risk averse. I think some of it has to do with guys just not actually being open downfield. Mike Williams getting dinged up a bit. I'm not sure if that affected the amount of shots they were willing to take with regard to the 50-50 balls or not, but you didn't see really any of those. And we love Keenan and everything that Keenan does. And if you can get Keenan to win vertically a few times, great, but you can't depend on it. That's not his game. He doesn't have the athletic profile to do it, but you do have 2 young guys that you literally just drafted that you can do that with. And I didn't see them utilize that at all, or at least attempt to, should I say.
You'd think a first-round pick wide receiver would be a bigger part of the game plan.
We'll take a look around the league, because the other first
Don't
round,
do it.
Okay.
Don't do it.
Right. Sorry. I'm just saying, if you're comparing first-round picks, a lot of them were pretty effective today, but go ahead.
I think we've covered pretty much everything. Have we covered everything?
I will say, you kind of talked about it a little bit, Jamie, but I feel like base defense was a huge issue today, and a lot of that was because number 9 was on the field a whole hell of a lot more than he should have, and he was absolutely lost today. JC Jackson deserves a ton of blame today, because he swung this game almost, I don't want to say single-handedly, because they had a chance to win the game in the end and could have scored and put them up 8 at one point. And if they went for 2, could have been 9 at one point. But Kenneth Murray was a real problem again. And the offseason talk about him having a great year this year and being prepared like he's never been prepared before. Seems like it's all bullshit. He's lost out there in the field. He doesn't know what he's seeing. He's constantly reading the wrong routes. He doesn't know how to read his keys. He's stopping his feet in the second level. He doesn't know how to attack the line of scrimmage. He doesn't know how to knife through the offensive line. He doesn't know how to read the run game. He's always trailing in coverage, and he sticks to blockers like no other linebacker I've seen in a very, very long time in a Chargers uniform. And there's been a lot of Chargers linebackers that have stuck to offensive linemen, and it just feels like Kenneth Murray is trying to recreate how bad you can be in the run game as a Chargers linebacker. So I've been done with Kenneth Murray. I'm glad they didn't pick up his 5th-year option, but this linebacker group is very, very thin. And Eric Kendricks, while he's a veteran and he made a couple plays today, the dude's like 31. I think he's going to turn 32 this season, if I'm not mistaken. And then they've got a bunch of rookies and some special teamers. So that second level is an issue. And the way to fix that is to not play in base so damn much. And they decided to run it. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it just felt like from the eye test, like it was just way, way, way too much. And you've drafted all these DBs in the draft, and it's time to start utilizing them. And get Kenneth Murray off my team and off the field.
Could not agree more. I have major concerns about the linebacking group, particularly in coverage. I mentioned it earlier. I mean, Murray and Kendricks both were trailing people all day long. I mean, they just seemed like they were completely lost out there. And there were instances where each of them were asked to run with Waddle or with Hill. That obviously isn't going to pan out well. But they both struggle with Smythe, who is hardly known for being
He's
productive
a plotter.
tight end.
He's a plotter.
He's a short to mid-range security blanket, and they made him look like an elite athlete who is a big-time playmaker. They couldn't run with him. That's pretty alarming. So this linebacker group, I know the coaching staff or the organization doesn't value linebackers, but they've got some issues to figure out because they're going to have a really hard time covering the middle of the field.
You know, the other really alarming thing is, and we talked about Kenneth Murray ad nauseum, but this is the last thing I want to say about him. There was one play where the Dolphins clearly were attempting to get the Chargers to declare that they were in man coverage. Can't remember if it was Mostert. Might have been Mostert. I think he came out of the huddle and went wide. I mean, to the field. And Murray had to go out there and defend him one-on-one. And they didn't exploit the matchup. I was so happy it didn't happen. I don't think that play went for much, or maybe it did, but it didn't go to Mostert. And I was literally about to have a heart attack because the fact that he has to play in space in the middle of the field is horrible. But thinking about the prospects of him having to run down the sideline with someone who's much faster than him off the line of scrimmage, what are you expecting him to do? Jam the guy? He's going to play cornerback coverage. It just seems like there wasn't much of a game plan for adjustments, and for a team that emphasizes and puts so much focus on DBs, when you have a scenario where your linebacking core, or one of your linebackers at least, is a liability in coverage, well, that's what all those DBs are for. Take the guy who's your do-it-all, but also better in the box, Derwin, and then replace him deep with one of those DBs that you've been cross-training to play the position, or someone that can play, safety or corner. Like, it just makes more sense to me to go about things that way to create those adjustments. Whereas today, it just seemed like Staley was content with attempting to go with it, and eventually he felt like his guys were going to make plays. When the Dolphins understood, without a shadow of a doubt, that these guys can't run with ours. So we're just going to consistently stress them by making them run horizontally, wear them out that way, and then force them to run with our guys vertically, which was one of the ways that they kept Tyreek Hill clean, by the way. They just motion him across the formation. You can't press him, and then he gets a running start. So you're going to get literally the fastest guy in the league a running start, and you've got middle linebackers trying to cover him. I mean, so you have to flush this one, but did Garrett go?
I don't know where he went.
No.
We just lost Garrett. We lost Garrett today.
Yeah, I think he had enough.
He had enough.
I'm right there with you. Tapped out. But yeah, so pretty much that's all I was saying. It just didn't seem like there was any focus on making any defensive adjustments. It seemed like there was no plan B, and so they paid dearly for it.
So we've hit on all the negatives. We've mentioned some of the positives, but I just want to say, as we get close to wrapping this up, I think the big positive for me was the offensive line. Outside of that last possession at the end of the fourth quarter, the offensive line was pretty much flawless. Can we say that? I mean, no sacks leading up to that last possession. They were running the ball down the Dolphins' throat. They were highly effective in both the run and the pass. They were really, really good. So the offensive line deserves a lot of credit. Big positive today. Zion and Salyer, I thought both, for the most part, outside of a few plays, both played really well and more or less fueled the running game. The running game, to me, was so much better designed. It seems like it's being taught in a much more coherent and intelligible manner to where everybody knows what their job is and they can actually execute what they're being asked to do. It just seems more organized and better designed, and it's becoming more efficient. So, big credit for Kellen Moore for the job he's doing with the running game. It's only one game, but it's definitely encouraging to see them run the ball as well as they did and see the offensive line play really, phenomenal football considering outside of Salyer and Zion, none of those guys played in the preseason.
Yeah, I agree. Offensive line was really good. Zion popped a lot, both he and Salyer. I mentioned this multiple times. Excited about the interior offensive line play this year. And there were a couple of occasions where Zion had some, issues. He had a penalty. He got beat on that last drive. But outside of that, he played, from what I saw, like pretty much a flawless game. I didn't see any real mishaps from Salyer that I can remember off the top of my head. But as a whole, the offensive line, even Trey Pipkins played pretty well. And, we keep an eyes on him because we don't know what to expect from him long term, outside of him just being kind of a serviceable offensive lineman. But I think he held up pretty well. You didn't hear much from Nick Chubb today, like at all. But I'm not super
Bradley Chubb
by that. Sorry,
Bradley
Chubb. Yeah. You didn't hear much from him today. I'm not surprised because we know who we have over there in Slater on the left side. So offensive line locked it down pretty well. The defense just has to help them out. The running game, fantastic. Again, I mentioned Joshua Kelly looked like an NFL running back, snap for snap. He wasn't utilized a ton in the passing game. I don't expect that to happen very often. Austin Eckler looked like Austin Eckler. Passing game, there are some things that need to be adjusted there. I would definitely like to see a lot more of the rookie wide receivers. And like we keep stressing, the team taking shots down the field or at least threatening down the field to create, some other opportunities underneath. But yeah, there was a lot to glean from on the offensive side of the ball. Again, not so much defensively, but even, Cameron Dicker, special teams, made all of his kicks. And one question mark was, could he, bomb it from over 50 yards? And I think he made a 50-yarder.
Yeah.
So looks like the Chargers made the right decision. And from a special team standpoint, we can't speak much to the return game because there was nothing to review there. But as the weeks go on, I'm sure that will show itself a little bit more as well. The defensive side of the ball just has to get shored up somehow, some way. And it's only week one. Doesn't mean that it's all downhill from here. But, at this point, we're kind of bookended with pain. The end of the season being what it was, and now week one. So just got to, get on the up and up here going into week two.
Yeah, I'm hoping this is the kind of, kick in the teeth they needed to kind of inspire them going forward. And it doesn't happen again because this was painful to watch. Imagine being in that locker room. But yeah, on to your guys' point. Last time Christian Wilkinson killed – or that Wilkinson?
Christian Wilkins.
Wilkins. Christian Wilkins, sorry. Christian Wilkins, Muhammad Wilkerson. Christian Wilkins killed them. And he was pretty much a non-factor. Bradley Chubb, not much of a factor at all today. Jalen Phillips is an ascending pass rusher and one of my favorite young budding stars as a pass rusher. Didn't hear from him much at all today. The job the offensive line did in protecting Herbert outside of that last drive was stellar. The way they reset the line of scrimmage for the entire game was stellar. So I'm really impressed with the run game today. The fact that they were averaging 6.5 yards per carry. They both almost had over 100 yards today. They both scored touchdowns today. They both were receiving weapons today. I mean, that was awesome. I think what you guys are talking about in the passing game, that needs to be fixed up. And hopefully it's not a personnel issue that they're not getting attacked downfield, or maybe it's just more of a Vic Fangio issue. But I just want to address Reginald here, who in all caps is asking why nobody talks about Tom Telesco being on a hot seat. And I just want to congratulate Reginald on his first Lightning Round podcast episode that he watched. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it, because this must be your first time here, because that's all we talk about all the damn time. And on a note, I don't know if you guys are ready to get out of here or not, but just know that it's all C. Knox's fault that the Chargers lost today, and everybody in the chat can blame him for the reason why the Chargers are 0-1. So
you're banned, C. Knox. No more games for you.
Thanks a lot, bud. And also, I mean, you'd think most teams who score 34 points, that's enough to win a game. But when you give up, almost 600 yards of offense, it's a little bit harder to win.
Big 12 football.
Just a little.
Big 12 football in the NFL.
Only punting once, scoring 34 points, getting 2 turnovers usually is a winning recipe. Not today. Not today. Anything else you guys want to touch on before we get out of here?
No, I think we covered everything.
I think the last thing I want to say is something I alluded to already, and we'll get into it when we're talking Titans prep. Again, I'm still not confident in that run defense. I didn't see a stellar performance at the beginning when the Dolphins were semi-committed to it. They were still making it happen on the ground. So we just sat here and we went through Tua dicing us up in the passing game. But if the Chargers are still leaking like a sieve from a run defensive standpoint, then there's a much larger issue at hand here.
Yeah, it definitely remains to be seen. I mean, I think Mostert only had like 10 carries all day today, but he was averaging, I think, like less than 4 yards a carry, which is good, but still, yeah, they got Derrick Henry, which is a whole nother animal to attend to. And that Titans run defense is one that was better than the Dolphins last year. So even though they gashed the fourth best run defense last year, they're going up against a much better unit this coming Sunday. So we will see. All right. Anything else you guys want to touch on before we get out of here?
I don't think so.
No? All right. Good. Well, we appreciate you guys joining us. A ton of you guys were here. We appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And we've got a whole lot of content coming, because we got a show Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Sunday again after the game. We really appreciate you guys joining us. Thank you, everybody, for coming on. And we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Come on, Craig.
Salute.